after the burnout, I realized that I wasn't in my fullest soul's alignment. That's what they say when you're in burnout, is that you're not in full soul alignment. And as a result, that's how Brave Women at Work has been born. And I have felt more vivacious, more joyful, more alive.
Introducing The Vixen Voice, a podcast for ambitious women entrepreneurs ready to move into their feminine essence, live their truth, and unlock their full potential. I'm your host, April Roberts, and each week I'll be interviewing inspiring women who decided to take a leap of faith to pursue their dream. Women who believe that they were born for something bigger. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of The Vixen Voice. I'm excited today. Our guest, Jen Pestikas. I have been on her podcast, Brave Women at Work. Check it out if you haven't. And we had a great time. We have so much in common. We both came from the financial industry. We have a lot of similar beliefs about women burning out at work and how to avoid it. So if you're worried about that, you definitely want to catch this episode. So it's very cool. Jen has been a financial services executive for 20 years. She has an amazing career, but that wasn't enough for her. She wanted to make more of an impact. And so she's also the founder of Brave Women at Work, where she does career and leadership coaching for women. Again, another synchronicity we have, that we focus on women and helping them be their best selves and succeed. So Jen, welcome. I'm super excited to have you here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's always good to speak to different people, and I'm excited to be part here and talking to your audience.
I love it. I love it. Me too. So since it is technically your first time to be on The Vixen Voice, even though we've podcasted together, I always love to ask, I feel sometimes life is what happens to us and sometimes we make it happen, right? But we all at this stage in life, we've had many pivotal stories. So I want to ask, what's a pivotal story or two that's happened in your life that made this amazing woman sitting here before us?
Oh, I love that question. Okay. So I'll just give you the ones that come to mind, if that's okay. So the first thing I would say, I think the birth of my first daughter, of course, like becoming a parent, rocks your world, and you can read every book and go to every class, but you just never know what you're going to be entering. And so I had my first daughter, and I am a recovering perfectionist, people pleaser, gold star chaser. And as a result, at the other side of that, I didn't know, but I was going to have postpartum anxiety and depression. Mm-hmm. And it actually, and I'm not trying to be negative Nancy here, but it really was a core shaker and took some time to heal from. And as a result, I feel that I'm a different person, right? I think motherhood has shaped me, softened me, made me different, better, more empathetic, more compassionate. I actually think a better leader. So that's a story in and of itself that we could talk in an entire podcast about. But I think that just becoming a mom was one of them. And I think the other, more recently in 2019, a story that comes to mind is I burnt out. And so that's why we're talking. So I'm very vulnerable and open about that story because I think it is a public service announcement to other women. I don't want people and other women to feel ashamed about burnout. I will say it's a real thing, even though I do not believe that it's still recognized by the medical community as an official medical diagnosis. I think they may see it as a symptom, but it is a real thing. And after the burnout, I realized that I wasn't in my fullest soul's alignment. That's what they say when you're in burnout, is that you're not in full soul alignment. And as a result, that's how Brave Women at Work has been born. And I have felt more vivacious, more joyful, more alive since listening to that calling to create this platform. So that, and again, that's why I'm here, and I'm happy to be here.
Oh my gosh, so much to unpack. First of all, it makes me so happy to hear that it made you more joyful and vivacious. I like to say one of my purposes is to be a vessel of joy. So I like to try to bring joy to people. So again, another thing we're aligned on. I think in today's world, joy is so underrated, right? You almost feel, it's like you're almost socialized to feel guilty for having joy and being alive, like you're too much. And I think the more of us that show up that way, we give other women permission to do the same because, you know, and I love that you talked about your soul alignment. I actually never thought of burnout that way. So we have so much to talk about. First of all, I heard you say something that I love, gold star chaser. I've never heard that term. So adding it to everything else, I get it. I remember the gold stars in elementary school. That's so funny. Or the multiple colored metallic stars. Yes, I love it. I love it. I love it. That definitely, I think that shows our generation, right? Gold star chaser.
Totally. Yeah.
And you know, a lot of things you talk about are such important topics for women. First of all, postpartum anxiety and depression. I know there was a big movement, what was it, 10, 15 years ago to talk about this. And, you know, my niece recently went through that. And then my sister shared with me, hey, I really went through that. And I don't understand why it's not more talked about and more addressed, because it's a real deal. And I mean, it's incredibly heavy on the woman, but it's heavy on the, you know, husband, partner, significant other, the children. Like, I mean, it really can be detrimental to families. And what I realized through my personal experiences of seeing women go through it is, you know, a lot of times you're getting mismedicated or over-medicated. And if you think about it, usually the mom is in charge of that, right? It's not like anyone else in the family. Like, she's the one making sure everyone's getting the proper medical attention, etc. And when the mom is suffering, who's making sure she's getting the proper medical attention? And I think that's something that we don't talk about, right? And it's not discussed.
Yeah, I will just add in here. So, and I was a double whammy, right? So I didn't know. And my daughter was born almost 13 years ago. So I was like right on the fringe of, we were talking about it, we weren't talking about it. Yes, I had to fill out a form at the doctor, but I thought I was Superwoman, and I had some shame probably. So did I answer the form entirely honestly? Probably not. Or even in my head, I was like, oh, I'm fine. It's just the baby blues. It'll go. Well, then, like, you know, a year later, it was still not going. And so I didn't get medicated. I didn't end up going to therapy. And I found out much later that it can escalate if you do not take care of it. And so, full circle moment, there was a woman that I was in at my church, and someone that I had known, and she had had a baby, and I just recognized some of the signs that I saw in myself. And I vulnerably said, I'm like, here, there's no judgment, there's no shame. Go to your doctor, you know, like go and see if this is happening to you. And she did, and she ended up having postpartum depression. And so, you know, I'm not a medical professional, but I just say, listen to your body and go to the doctor if you need to go and get the support you need. And there's no shame in doing so.
Yeah. And, you know what's best for you, but in those moments, you may not have full capacity to decide, right? Correct. So at least having a conversation with someone, like you said, there's therapy, there's doctors, there's alternative remedies, but like doing something to acknowledge the problem, because I do think there's a lot of shame, and especially if it's your first child, because it's so overwhelming without issues. And so it can be very confusing, like where that line is, right? Like, totally. Am I just overwhelmed by being a mom, or is there something greater going on here? So thank you for sharing that, and also delaying it, how delaying it increases it, because I just think the more we talk about it, and, I haven't had children, so I can't speak to this. I've just gone through it with people I'm close to, right, and seen from the outside. But I think the more women who share, hey, here's what happened to me and here's how I felt, it's just really important because someone listening may say, oh my goodness, that's me, or I felt that way too. And it just brings greater awareness. I think it's incredibly important to talk about. So thank you for sharing that story. I kind of relate. It has nothing similarly, but I was in a car accident when I was a lawyer at the largest firm in Atlanta. Like I was driving from Nashville back to Atlanta, like spun across 6 lanes of traffic and a car hit me, right? Like I hit this like kind of puddle area. And I just remember, the ambulance comes and they're like, ma'am, do you want to go to the hospital? I'm like, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. And then like the tow truck takes me somewhere. My roommate comes and picks me up because I'm not quite home. And I'm on the treadmill running the next day because I'm like, I'm fine. I'm fine. And like 4 days later, I'm just bawling at work. And thank goodness my secretary is like, April, I am taking you to the emergency room. Like, this isn't you. You're acting like, and sure enough, we go and I have a concussion and because I didn't get medical attention right away, my concussion becomes, it increases. And so I think this happens to a lot of us high performance women. We just want to say, I'm fine. Everything's okay. I'm going to keep going on. And that's how we latch onto security and stability and safety, which is important to us too. But, the more we can feel open to saying, hey, you know what? I'm not sure everything's okay. Maybe I need to find a safe space and someone I can talk to. It's just incredibly important. So again, thank you for sharing. Anything else that you'd like to mention about that part of your life?
It was just, I think, the kickoff of what I would call kind of the turn or the pivot in my life. So, I became a mom and then went through, and I know we want to talk about other things, but went through secondary infertility, which is again, a whole other podcast, and then went through some other personal things and then the burnout. So, went through some roller coasters. And then, of course, we all had COVID, right? So the last 5 to, 7 years, even beyond that, were a little rocky for me, but it's okay. It's okay because as I look back, I see the lessons and I see the things that led to, starting the podcast like you've mentioned that you were on, and starting the Women's Anthology series and coaching women. And people will ask me, how do you do it all? And first of all, I'm going to say I don't do it all. I have a lot of support. So I want to make sure that any women that are listening to this understand, get help if you have the resources to get help. If you need someone to help you with the housework, if you need someone to help you with the kids, I truly believe it takes a village. And so people ask me all the time, bottom line, how do you do it all? I don't. I get help. But on top of it, it also makes me a better corporate leader to do this work with Brave Women at Work, which are people are kind of huh? But it's because it gives me so much joy. I receive joy, and then I become a vessel, like you said, for joy to other women and support to other women. That makes me more creative, innovative, gives me a fresh perspective in my corporate work. So it works for me. And yeah, so that's what I like to say about that.
No, I love that concept because with my clients, I like to work on their personal core values because a lot of times we have other values, right? And it's just really what fills your cup. So mine are alignment, affection, and adventure. And 2020 really highlighted the adventure for me when I was stuck at home, right? And it's oh my gosh, I'm literally feel like I'm losing my sanity. How do I fix this? And, I started waking up and having walks at sunrise because the world looks magical at sunrise. So that was my adventure during COVID. But you have to know what fills your cup. And when your cup is full, like you said, you give so much more. And in a society where a lot of women are putting everyone else first, we tend to forget this, to fill our cup so that we can show up even better for the people we love. So I love that you talk about juggling these things. Did you have, I like to get real here, did you have moments of guilt or feeling badly or any negative emotions, or were you very clear on, I want to do this work and I'm going to make it happen? How easy was that transition for you, or how rocky? Thank you.
No. So I have had all the emotions, right? So when I was going through burnout, my friends and family, everyone's on high alert, right? So then I tell them, as I'm listening to my intuition and self-trust and intuition became a big thing. I became friends with myself again. and listening to myself and what I really wanted, rather than, going full circle to what I said, like being a gold star chaser and saying, oh, well, someone else says this is what I should do. It almost feels like after I got out of college, I got into like the life, the raft of life, right? And just went down the river, and wherever people told me to go, I just started going because that's what I was supposed to do, instead of making proactive decisions based on what was really important to me. So I tell everyone, I'm like, hey, I'm going to start a podcast. And they're like, you should be doing less, not more. And I had to kind of hold to my guns to say, hey, no, this is going to really be healing for me, that I'm going to be listening to all of these other wonderful and powerful women. And it has, like, they have poured into me as I've been creating, and I think that podcast is an art form, is I've been creating art for other people. And so that has been difficult. Then putting it out in the world, April, it's like there's all this like, oh my God, what if no one listens to it? What if no one cares? There's that whole imposter syndrome. And then also owning it in front of like my corporate like colleagues and in my boss and all of these people. I'm like, oh my word, like what are they going to think? And then, not to diminish them in any way, shape, or form, but I had to get beyond that because it was about, well, what do I want? Like, what do I think? So, yes, I've had the whole range of emotions on this work.
Hi, sorry for the interruption. This is April Roberts, and I just wanted to make sure that you knew about the Vixen Founders Collective. What in the world is it? It is our community where we bring together Gen X female founders, and my goal is to create the ultimate business consulting, networking, and personal growth community for Gen X female founders. So if you're wanting to know more, just click on the link below because we're having a lot of fun in there. We are growing our businesses and we are becoming better women. So I'd love to have you join us anytime. Click the link below to learn more, and I'll see you inside the collective. Thank you for sharing that because, I was talking to a woman the other day and we had done a podcast together, but we were just chatting and we were talking about how, when most people become entrepreneurs and like you coach on leadership and career progression, same thing, the greater your responsibility becomes, right? It's so important that you focus on self-growth. Like at first, we didn't understand how painful it would be to be entrepreneurs because there's this mirror constantly in front of your face. And, the more you self-reflect, the more successful you are, but it's painful at first to really have that self-reflection mirror up there. I was sharing that the first mastermind I went to, I'm extremely extroverted. Back then was definitely, I'm getting older and I like my quiet time, right? But, I always wanted to be like in the mix of the party. Like I wanted to have the cocktail hour afterward. And at the end of the day, I would go back to my room and order room service because I was just emotionally depleted from the self-reflection all day long. And so it's so important as you step into a leadership role, be it in the corporate world or as an entrepreneur, that you're really doing that self-growth. And I think that's a lot of what you help your clients with. So share with us kind of what you've seen, maybe some of the challenges are, or how you help your clients as they evolve up that ladder.
Yes, thank you so much for that question. So a lot of the women that are attracted to Brave Women at Work, it's funny. It's like you attract, or at least I do. I attract like people kind of like me, like, that are things that I have gone through. I become the teacher of the things that I have gone through. And so very similar. Other gold star chasers, really high achievers, women that are on the verge of burnout, women that they can't quiet the voice in their mind, meaning that inner imposter is so strong that it actually is sabotaging them. I have a person that I'm working with, a few of them actually, that they are, when they're in a meeting, let's say in a corporate environment or any meeting, like even if you're an entrepreneur that's listening, you're in your meeting, whatever that may be, and you have almost like a play-by-play, like a ref or like a judge kind of going like, oh, well, what should you be saying? Or you shouldn't have said that, or, all of those things. So what I do is I really help women, like you said, get quieter and not eliminate imposter syndrome or, a lack of confidence, because that's situational. I think that would be a lie to say, or anytime I see ads like, you can completely get rid of imposter syndrome. I think that's part of the human condition, quite frankly. So you need to know how to manage it. So I'm giving them tools on how to manage it. So we go through, and I built this confidence building model. So going through it quickly, it's like, okay, we've got to start noticing, because a lot of times we're unconscious in those thought processes. Mm-hmm. So I want them to start noticing when those other voices are coming up in terms of imposter syndrome, lack of confidence, things like that, without judgment. That in and of itself is a win, because you're becoming more aware, and that is redirecting your energy. The other thing that I'm learning, I'm not an expert on, is nervous system healing. So a lot of the women that I work with are not in their bodies, they're in their minds. They're only in their minds. They think they can outthink things or be logical. Of course, and that brain and that side of the brain makes a difference. But I think it takes a whole body and mind spirit process to heal from these things, these like traumas that you may have gone through. So I will give them nervous system techniques to help them tap into their body so they can be more present, like in that meeting, for example. And then we go through a reframe process in those thoughts, because, we have these neural pathways in the brain, and, we believe, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. Well, if you think about that long enough, that's your belief. And then what you do is you find confirmations everywhere for that belief, because that becomes your safety or your comfort zone. And anything outside of that zone is what drives fear or that lack of confidence. So I'm helping them through that process. And I will tell you, I have women that'll come because they're like me, right? They're like hard chargers. They're like ambitious. They're like, okay, can we like get this done in like 3 sessions? I'm like, no. I'm not going to lie to them. I mean, it takes time. It's taken you, 20, 30, 40 years to get to these places and these spaces. And it's going to take a little time to unweave that or to learn a new way of being. But it gives me no greater joy than, seeing a woman that'll say, hey, I spoke up in the meeting. I had a difficult conversation. I got paid more. I really owned my path. All of those, it makes my entire day when I can see those changes happening.
Yeah, and I think a great antidote to imposter syndrome is being on purpose or focusing on the value you bring. So, you talked about your soul being aligned on purpose. And I think, because I had a TV show, then I did live TV. I've spoken on big stages, right? And people are always like, oh, and by the way, with all that in my past, when I go live on Instagram, it's more nerve-wracking for me than any of that. So I just want to throw that out there. So if you're hesitating there, it's totally normal, right? So you're right. It is situational a lot of times. But for me, it was always about focusing on the value I brought. Like I wasn't really thinking about myself, right? Because if I was thinking about myself, I would have become self-conscious and I would have freaked out and gotten weird. Like even when I did TV, when I looked at the camera, I would think of one of my favorite clients. Like I was speaking directly to them and advising them. So I always, even before a podcast, like I'll say prayers, I do a little meditation, and I'm just like, hey, what value can we bring today, right? Or, there may be one woman who hears this podcast and it totally helps them realize, hey, I need to go talk to someone about that. And then it is 100% worth your and my time if that one woman listens, right? And I think so often we're caught up, especially in today's world, oh, how many likes did I get? How many people engaged? How many people commented? Like when I go live in my Facebook group, if there's one woman, she's getting all I got, right? Like sometimes there's no one and they're getting all I got because somebody's going to watch the replay. And so, I just want to share, like, even in our experience, yes, we experience that too. But the more you can flip that, I think you can show up different, because I love everything you're talking about. So I don't know if you know, but I'm a spiritual healer as well. And what's interesting, is we heal on like 5 different levels, right? And mental is just one of them. So it's like mental, physical, emotional, cellular, energetic, and spiritual, right? So So like you said, if you're stuck in your head all the time, that's only like one part of your being. And I think you understand this, and that's the work you're doing, even if you don't break it down that way. But yeah, and the crazy thing is we women, our bodies and our intuition are so wise. Like I would argue it's wiser than our brain, right? Like that should lead, and then our brain figures out how we get there. Like that's the computer that figures it out. So I'm curious, like what's kind of maybe the first step you would recommend to someone listening who's like, you know what, I know I'm in my head all the time. Like what's maybe 1 to 3 steps that they could do fairly easily to start the change? Because I think when you see a little bit of change, you stay on the course. I'm sure you see that with your clients, right?
Yes. So I would say breathing, which sounds so maybe trite, but it's real. And so I've done a lot of breathing work, meditation. And when I say meditation, I was so resistant to meditation and breath work for so long because I thought it had to be, again, I'm a gold star chaser. So I'm like, oh, it has to be perfect. It has to be 30 minutes. It has to look like this or whatever. Yeah. No, I mean, and so I didn't realize, because I was so stressed for so long, that I was breathing like from like up here, right? I wasn't even breathing from like my lower back ribs or lower belly area or whatever. So I think literally just stopping and noticing how you're breathing is a great place to start. And so if you find yourself very much in your head, you can literally just, you can do box breathing, right? So you kind of go in for 4, you hold for 4, and then you let go for 4. And you can do it 3 to 5 times, and then just notice, like just stop, don't judge, don't say, oh, that doesn't count. That's all stuff that I would have said to myself years ago. I think you just kind of take that in, and you'll notice like a small change, right? So then there's that. So I think in times of stress, or in preparation for large meetings, large conversations, just doing a little bit of box breathing would be really helpful. I think also, like you've mentioned, understanding kind of your values, your core values, what's important to you, because I went so long with not knowing how to, I just navigated by thinking what was important to the world, right? Well, the world has got its own, agenda, and it wasn't in alignment to mine. And so once I started learning my values, I could make better or more aligned decisions for myself. And I think the last piece is, if you can get still and breathe, you can create those moments of listening to that intuition so that it can regrow that relationship. Because I was in my head so much, I kind of, I don't want to say severed, it was just like a strained relationship, right? I was kind of on a breakup with my intuition. So I had to get still enough and then start listening. And it was like, oh, there's like a whole level of wisdom down there, like in there, in that soul that I didn't even know existed. And then once I started tapping into that fabric, things started to get a little interesting and definitely started changing.
Yeah, it's interesting when you just know things, right? And that comes from your intuition. And we are socialized in Western culture to break apart from that. And so you really do have to relearn that skill set of listening to. And I think it's important to be grateful for your intuition, because, anytime you're grateful, you're welcoming more in. But I love what you're sharing. And it's interesting because if you've ever done one of my webinars or challenges, we start with box breathing, because I want the women there to get back in their body. And I love just taking that deep breath, like trying to breathe almost even into your pelvis, right? Even though your diaphragm's higher, but imagining and then pushing everything out. So I do these breathing exercises. I understand them. I meditate every day. And yesterday, I just learned something new. I went to get a Brazilian lymphatic massage, which, by the way, if you know someone good, go do it. I did it facial and body. It was amazing. Like, I wish I could go every week. I just don't have time. And nor does she have openings because she's that booked, but find someone good. But I was like, oh, when you were touching here, it was kind of tender. And she was like, yeah, that's your diaphragm. Your lymphatic system was blocked there. And I was like, but I meditate, I do breathing, and I go, you know what? I talk all day long. Because I do. Here I am with you. I have 5 podcast interviews, or I'm on Zooms with clients. And she said, yeah, when we talk, we don't think to take the time to take a deep breath, right? And so she shared with me, like, in between meetings, like stretch and then stretch the diaphragm, stand up, do that deep breathing. And I was like, wow, that's so cool. And like you said, we're constant students our whole life. That's what we're here for, right? So you can't think like, I've got this, I know this. Because she even told me, you're a great breather, like, because she asked me to take deep breaths, right? So, just always be listening and paying attention to your body. And when you're like, hey, something's not right here, figure it out. Because sometimes it's super easy to fix. You just need to become aware of it. So, oh my gosh, I love all the work you do. I know we don't have a ton more time. So what I would love to ask you, Jen, is can you take us to the period of burnout and maybe share kind of how it felt being you or how you realized you were burnout? Because I'm sure there are women out there needing to hear this.
Yes. So so just backing it up. So early 2019, I started having the physical symptoms before the emotional ones. Mm-hmm. So things like digestive issues, things like insomnia started happening, but they were like a cascade. And so I had like digestion, I had skin issues, like my skin was like really weird. Like I started having flushing, like rosacea, digestion, like I said, insomnia. And then I had significant hair loss. So I know it was something in my body too, like maybe like all types of deficiencies, but my body was like putting up all of these red flags. And then the emotional stuff come. I mean, because it's stressful, right? You're like losing all this hair. You're like all this stuff is happening in your body. You think that you're doing all the things. And everyone, just so you're all aware, I was a very hardcore exerciser. But what I learned was I was over exercising. So now what I do is I just walk. And I'm planning to get back into the weights a little bit, but nothing too crazy. Because I was actually contributing to the burnout by over exercising and over stressing my body. I didn't need to go that hard. And so people might think, oh, well, it was just because you weren't taking, I was doing all of the things. I was going to get the massages and, drinking the water and all the stuff. It was the stress that was like causing all the stop signs in my body. And then after that, what started happening is anxiety, depression. And then the peak point was I came home and I had a full-on panic attack. And I was like kind of bent over in my kitchen and like holding onto the counter so I didn't fall over. And my husband was home and I was like, I've got to go back to work because I was on a break or something like that. And he just looked at me. He goes, you can't go back. You can't go back. Like, you're not going back in this condition. And so he just said right then and there that I needed to take a break. And I was lucky enough that I was eligible for FMLA leave and I ended up taking 12 weeks off. Wow. And I am not ashamed of this. Like I was ashamed at the time, but I ended up going through an outpatient at a hospital affiliated outpatient mental health program. And it was kind of like my Girl Interrupted moment. If you've ever seen that, I'm that's more dramatized, but it was my moment that I was like, I need to learn different coping mechanisms to take care of myself and to, for stress management. And obviously what I've been doing to this point, although it looks great on paper, is not working. And so anyone who has any of those symptoms, the one thing I will say is that often a hyperachiever, an overachieving woman will ignore the symptoms because maybe yours aren't as big of a cascade as mine. I will just implore you, do not ignore them. Your body is talking to you, and don't let it get to the point like it got to with me.
Yeah, I find that when we don't choose to pause, eventually we're forced to pause, right? Which is what happened with you. And the same happened to me when I was in my marriage and my husband was an addict and I was just emotionally, mentally, and physically drained. And I was supposed to get on a plane to go home. And same thing, like I just basically went into convulsions physically, like just kind of collapsed. And my parents were like, you're not getting on that plane. Like, we're not letting you get on that plane. And, you know, again, all the signs are there. And when you don't listen, I kind of call it your 2x4 moment, right? You get a 2x4 to the forehead and you don't really have a choice. So I'm going to second. And a lot of the work I do is like, gosh, if I had had these skill sets when I was going through that or understood these things, I wouldn't have gotten to that place, right? And I'm sure you feel the same way.
Yes, I feel exactly the same. And I feel if this show helps one woman, then we've done our jobs. Agreed. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up. But Jen, I'd love to have you back. I think we should have a panel about some of these topics because this is so important to talk about. We're different women. We're all sharing our stories. So I'm going to end it on a lighter note by saying I feel we women, you know, if we tap into our feminine essence, it really helps with a lot of these things. And like you mentioned, like our bodies and our intuition are so wise. And you can't always be in your feminine energy, right? Everyone on the planet, I don't care what sex, what gender they are, we all have feminine and masculine energy. You can call it yin and yang, whatever you want to call it. And we're not trained to honor the feminine energy part of us for the most part, especially if you're in corporate America, like pushing, it's a very masculine energy environment. So I like to remind us to get back to our feminine energy so that we can fill our cup and repair. So Jen, when do you feel that your feminine energy is flowing the most? So I would say I'm learning to just dance more, right? And just
let
it go. And then I also have been going to more live music, like live concerts or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then you kind of just sway with everybody in like a larger audience. And obviously everyone's singing. And I feel in that collective space, like more feminine energy, especially in myself and in like the whole.
I love it. Yes, moving your body is really important. And music, I love it. What color is your feminine energy, if you had to put a color to it?
So what comes to me first thing is magenta.
That's my color. That's so funny.
Everybody, I promise we didn't prepare. We didn't prepare in advance.
No, I love it. So is yours more pink or purple? Because there's a scale of magenta.
I would say mine's leaning a little on the purplish side.
Yeah, same for me. That's so funny. I love this question because I've gotten every answer from black to red to magenta to teal blue to Kelly green. So I just love to show that, you know, we all come in different shapes and sizes and we're all magnificent in our own way. And it's so important, really, like you said, you called it self-trust. I like to talk about self-love and self-forgiveness. It's so important to just understand the magical creature that you are and the gift you are to earth. So I love it. I already knew you were going to have the same color as me, by the way. My intuition, I have a great relationship with my intuition. Sometimes people are like, how did you know that was going to happen? I'm like, gee, don't ask. Just don't ask.
Just go with it.
Yeah, let's just go. Come on. Awesome. Well, this was so fun today, Jen. Thank you. It was a great conversation. Oh, before we go, super important. You just had a new book come out. So if you want to share that info, and the link is in the show notes, everyone. Friendly reminder, if you are not subscribed to the Vixen Voice, go to our website, vixengathering.com, hit subscribe. And when we talk about these awesome resources, you don't have to search for them. They get delivered to your inbox every Tuesday and Thursday when the new episode drops. So in the meantime, if you're not subscribed, you can find it in the show notes. So Jen, tell us about your new book and how our audience can pre-order, please.
Yes, thank you so much. So the book is called Brave Women at Work, Lessons in Leadership, and it is available in ebook as of April 2024, and it's coming out in the fall in September in hardcover. And I have to say, it's a beautiful anthology of women's learnings and lessons, you know, the things they wish we would have, you know, all known as leaders from leaders in academia and from pharmaceuticals, all the different industries, right? I'm in financial services. So I highly encourage you to pick up a copy, and it can be found wherever books are sold. So yeah, you've got the link in the show notes. And then of course, if you have you're curious about the work that I do after today's show, bravewomanatwork.com is where you'll find everything about me and what I do with women.
I love it. Thank you so much. So Jen, I always like to say the world needs a lot more love, and I like to challenge our audience. How can they show up giving themselves and others love today? So what would your final message be to our audience?
What would my final message be to the audience is I think that the foundation here is being curious, really listening to your body. I think a lot of what we talked about is like curiosity and really tapping in and getting the resources you need and asking for what you want. And I think those foundational pieces are self-nurturing, self-caring, and can be transformative into self-healing. And so I encourage you to get started on your own path to healing and your own journey to self-discovery.
I love that. And I feel to add on, be generous, right? And I don't mean give everything to everyone, but generosity is different than scarcity. So, even when it comes to, somebody was talking to me like, oh, well, what if someone wants their money back from this program? I'm like, we give them their money back. Like if they don't want to be there, I don't want them there, right? But how many people get concerned about chargebacks or different things? It's a scarcity mentality. So be generous. When you have knowledge and value, give it to others, and it only comes back to you, right? So I love that. So be loving, be curious, love yourself, and be generous. Thank you, Jen. It was such an amazing talk. All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks again for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to hit subscribe so future episodes are automatically downloaded directly to your device. And if you want access to today's show notes, including links to all the resources we mentioned, visit vixengathering.com/podcast. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you next week for another episode of The Vixen Voice.